Hey everyone, welcome back to some Entitled People stories. Today we're jumping into 3 tales where entitlement shows up wearing very different outfits. A girlfriend demanding instant family bonds, a coworker quietly claiming something that wasn't hers, and an HOA that forgot federal law exists. What makes these stand out isn't just the behavior, it's the moment each situation snapped back into reality. Here we go. Petty revenge with a suitcase. My family secretly planned a cruise and expected me to watch the kids. My aunt decided to retire in style. After 30 years at the same hospital, she booked herself a cruise, followed by 3 days in Hawaii, then back home. All of her adult kids were going. It was meant to be a big family celebration, something she'd apparently been planning for months. Nobody told me. I'm not on Facebook, and that's apparently the only place my extended family communicates. They all have my phone number. They text me when they need recipes, when someone needs help moving, when they want me to babysit. But somehow, when it came to a retirement cruise, I just slipped through the cracks. I only found out a week before they were leaving. We were all at my parents' house for Sunday dinner, and I casually said, I should probably get Aunt Linda a retirement gift. When's she leaving again? My sister looked at me like I'd grown a second head and said, next week? We'll just give it to her on the cruise. I laughed awkwardly and asked, what cruise? That's when the entire table went quiet. Apparently everyone had known for weeks. Flights booked, cruise cabins reserved, hotel stays in Hawaii paid for, coordinated outfits, excursions, the works. When I asked why nobody mentioned it to me, my cousin said, we assumed you were staying back with the babies. I just stared at her. Excuse me? My sister shrugged and said, well, someone had to watch them. You're the only one not really doing anything right now. For context, the babies were my cousin's 3-year-old, my sister's 2-year-old, and twin infants. 4 kids under the age of 3. No one had asked me, no one had discussed dates, no one had confirmed anything. They'd simply decided I would be the default childcare provider. I felt like the only reason I hadn't been told about the cruise was so I would be conveniently available. I told them calmly, actually, I can still take the time off and go. I'd love to come. I didn't even particularly want to go at that point, but I wanted to see what they'd say. If this was truly an innocent oversight, they'd be happy to include me. 2 days later, my cousin, the self-appointed cruise coordinator, texted me, I'm so sorry, but the cruise is sold out. I only secured enough spots for those who RSVP'd. You're welcome to fly to Hawaii and meet us there if you can find your own accommodations, but since everyone planned on you watching the kids, you'd need to figure out childcare first. I replied, nobody ever asked me to watch anyone's kids. She never answered. That silence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't an accident. They hadn't forgotten me. They had excluded me on purpose so I'd be available, and now that I'd disrupted the plan, I was the problem. The funny thing is, I'd already requested the week off work when I first heard about the cruise. I figured even if I didn't go, I could use the break. So instead of sitting home waiting to see if they'd try to guilt me into childcare, my boyfriend, my adult son, and I booked our own trip. Different state, different coast, entirely unrelated. I didn't tell a single person. The morning they were scheduled to leave, my phone exploded. Where are you? We're outside your house. Why aren't you answering? This isn't funny. We're supposed to drop the kids off. I was sitting in a hotel lobby 2 states away when the first wave of calls came in. I silenced my phone and went to breakfast. I didn't answer a single message the entire week. We went hiking, tried new restaurants, laughed a lot, and genuinely had one of the best vacations we've had in years. It was peaceful. When I turned my phone back on after we got home, it was chaos. Apparently, several family members had to cancel their cruise spots because they couldn't find last-minute childcare. Some lost money, some stayed behind entirely. My cousin called me selfish and said, this isn't how family treats each other. I told her calmly, family also doesn't volunteer someone for childcare without asking. She escalated and said they had considered calling the police because they expected me to be home and responsible for the kids. I actually laughed out loud. You can't report me for not watching children I never agreed to watch, I said. That's not how that works. That's the part that gets me. They were going to call the police because you weren't where they expected you to be. They built an entire plan around your labor without ever mentioning it to you, and when you weren't there, they thought the authorities would back them up. The sheer audacity of it. You didn't owe them an explanation for existing somewhere else. You never even agreed to the job. They kept insisting it was an accident that I wasn't told. I asked, an accident for weeks? An accident through dinner conversations? An accident while you were booking flights and hotels? No one had a real answer. The part that really sealed it for me was when my cousin said, "We just thought you'd be fine with it since you've watched them before." Yes, I had, after discussion, after confirming dates, after agreeing. Not as an unspoken obligation, because I don't have toddlers at home anymore. I'm not a kid person. I raised my son, he's an adult, I love him fiercely, but those years are behind me. My house isn't childproofed, and I don't particularly want to relive diapers and meltdowns for someone else's convenience. That doesn't make me heartless, it makes me honest. The fallout didn't magically resolve. If anything, it revealed cracks that had been there for years. Over time, things in that extended family spiraled in ways that had nothing to do with me. Arrests, custody battles, rehab, identity theft. My parents eventually distanced themselves too. I changed my contact information and moved. I'm no contact with most of them now. Do I regret taking that trip? Not even slightly. They wanted me quiet and available. They wanted me predictable. They wanted to make decisions for me and present them as done deals. Instead, I packed a suitcase and left town. If they lost money on cruise deposits because they couldn't find a last-minute babysitter, that's unfortunate, truly. But I'm not the emergency backup plan for adults who never bothered to communicate. What they call selfish, I call boundaries. And the week I spent laughing with my boyfriend and my son, that's a memory I'll take over a babysitting shift any day. And our second story. Instant karma delivered at minus 20 degrees Celsius. My boot thief brother learned why you don't steal from family. This happened more than 20 years ago, but every winter when I see a pair of Timberlands, I think about it and smile. My brother and I have always had a complicated relationship, and by complicated, I mean he's always treated my belongings like a free community lending library. Clothes, cash from my dresser, tools, jackets, you name it. If it wasn't nailed down, there was a solid chance he'd borrow it and then mysteriously forget to return it. Back then, I had a beautiful pair of Timberland boots. They weren't cheap, and I had saved up for them myself. I kept them at our family cottage in my bedroom closet because that's where I used them the most during fall and early winter trips. One weekend, I went up there, opened the closet, and they were gone. I asked my brother about them directly. "Have you seen my boots?" I said, already knowing the answer. He didn't even blink. "Nope, haven't touched them. Why would I take your boots?" That was his specialty, looking offended that I would even suggest such a thing. I didn't have proof, so I let it go. But I knew he would never spend money on quality footwear when he could just help himself to mine. A few months later, Christmas rolled around. We were all at my mother's house in Winnipeg, gathered for dinner. It was one of those classic prairie winter nights where the wind cuts through your coat and the snow squeaks under your boots. The kind of night where good footwear actually matters. The front door opened, and in walked my brother, wearing my boots. I stared at his feet for a full 5 seconds before looking up at his face. He saw me looking and glanced down casually. "Oh, are these yours?" he said, like he'd just discovered a stray sock. "I'll drop them off next week." I felt my jaw tighten. "You know GD well they're mine," I said evenly. "You would never spend money on quality shoes." He gave a half smirk, half shrug, like it was all a misunderstanding. Before I could say anything else, my mother jumped in from the kitchen. "Oh, he just took them by mistake," she said quickly. "It was an accident. He'll bring them by." An accident. For 3 months, he just accidentally wore your boots to Christmas dinner? The audacity of walking in wearing them, looking you in the eye and pretending it was an innocent mix-up? That's not borrowing. That's a power move. An accident, right. Like he tripped and fell into my closet, laced them up, and wore them for 3 months. I looked at her, then at him, and just nodded. There was no point arguing. Christmas dinner wasn't the battlefield I wanted that night. I decided to let him think he'd gotten away with it again. Dinner went on as usual. Turkey, mashed potatoes, awkward small talk. My brother walked around all evening in my boots like nothing was wrong. Every time I saw them, I felt that familiar mix of irritation and disbelief. He'd stolen from me, lied about it, and then had the audacity to act like it was some harmless mix-up. A couple hours later, I leaned toward my wife and whispered, "Let's go." She looked at me, read my face, and nodded immediately. She'd seen this routine before. I stood up and announced that I wasn't feeling great and said our goodbyes. Everyone was distracted, clearing plates and packing leftovers. My brother had kicked off the boots near the front door and slipped into a pair of house slippers. As I walked toward the door, I didn't hesitate. I bent down, grabbed the boots, and carried them out with me like they were always meant to leave with me. No speech, no confrontation, just quiet reclamation. We got into the car, shut the doors, and I started laughing before I even put the key in the ignition. My wife looked at me and grinned. "You actually did it." "You bet I did," I said. "I'm done playing nice." We pulled out of the driveway and headed home through blowing snow. About 10 minutes later, my phone started ringing. I already knew who it was. I answered, still smiling. "Hello?" My mom was furious. "He had to go home in my pink slippers," she snapped. I couldn't hold it in. I burst out laughing. "It's not funny," she yelled. "It's freezing out there. He had to scrape the ice off his windshield wearing my slippers." That image made it worse. My grown brother, who had strutted into Christmas dinner wearing stolen boots, now standing in a Winnipeg blizzard in pink fuzzy slippers trying to chip ice off his car. I took a breath and said calmly, "Those were my boots. He knew it. I knew it. You knew it." She huffed. "You could have waited." "He could have not stolen them in the first place," I replied. There was a long pause. She didn't have a comeback for that. He never apologized. Not that night, not later. But interestingly, he stopped borrowing my things after that. I think standing in -20 weather in pink slippers might have left a stronger impression than any lecture ever could. No argument works against it. He stole, you took back what was yours, and he had to face the consequences in pink slippers. She can't defend him without admitting she knew the whole time. The silence says everything. And our last story. "You're going to buy me a house?" "Nope, Karen." A few years ago, my husband left a comfortable, stable job for a risky position at a tiny startup. It wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't lucrative in the beginning. In fact, he took a massive pay cut to do it because he believed in what they were building and genuinely loved the work. That decision changed our entire household dynamic overnight. His hours became unpredictable and long, sometimes stretching late into the evening and bleeding into weekends. I picked up everything else without hesitation. I handled the kids, the school runs, the doctor appointments, the homework meltdowns, the groceries, the laundry, the endless stream of birthday parties and permission slips. I also kept a small side job so we weren't completely strapped, even though it meant juggling my own work around bedtime routines and soccer practices. We lived lean for a while. There were months when we skipped vacations and postponed home projects because every dollar mattered. I never once complained because we were in it together. When he needed to study, I made sure the house was quiet. When he came home exhausted, dinner was ready. When he doubted himself, I reminded him why he took the leap in the first place. It paid off. The startup took off faster than anyone expected. Investors came in. Contracts rolled in. Suddenly, my husband wasn't just an employee, he was a key player. He received a substantial salary increase, a share in the company, and a bonus that made my head spin when I saw the number. There were perks too, like a company car. For the first time in our lives, we had breathing room. We're currently building our dream home. We were also planning to invest a significant portion of the money so we could set ourselves up for retirement and our kids' future. We sat down together, mapped out numbers, and talked through our goals like we always have. It felt responsible and exciting at the same time. Then my mother-in-law showed up. She didn't ease into the conversation. She walked in, sat down, and said, "Your sister-in-law needs to move. There are no rentals near the kids' school. Everything available is for sale." She paused dramatically and added, "You two can afford to buy her a house. She can pay you back." I blinked. My husband leaned back in his chair and rubbed his chin. His sister does have health issues, and she's responsible, so I could see him trying to justify it in his head. "It could help get her stable," he said slowly. I kept my voice calm. "I love your sister. She's great. But mixing large financial arrangements with family can get messy." I'd want to talk to our accountant and a lawyer before even considering something like that. And it would mean delaying our investment plans. My mother-in-law's head snapped toward me like I'd insulted her personally. It's his money, she said sharply, not yours. The room went silent. I'm sorry, I asked. It's his bonus. He worked for it. You have no right to control it, she continued. I always suspected you were money hungry. Now your true colors are showing. Sister-in-law needs help, and you're being greedy. There it is. The mask comes off. All those years you spent holding things together, working side jobs, making dinner, keeping the house running, none of that counted as work to her. Only the paycheck matters. Only the bonus. She can't see partnership. She only sees ownership. I felt the heat rise to my face, but I refused to shout. We make financial decisions together, I said evenly. That's how our marriage works. She scoffed. You're a gold digger. That's what you are. He should be able to help his sister without you hovering over every dollar. What she conveniently forgot is that when I met my husband, he was working retail. He quit that job to finish his education, and I supported him through it. When he had a terrible boss who barely paid him, I covered more of the bills. I held everything together while he built his career. It's never been about money for me. It's always been about partnership. She stormed out, and I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. Later that evening, my husband's phone buzzed. He handed it to me without a word. It was a long message from his mother. She told him he needed to consider divorcing me because I would keep a tight leash on his money. She suggested he get a good family lawyer before I tried to take the kids and drain him dry. She said I would use the children as leverage. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My husband's jaw clenched as he read it again. This is insane, he muttered. She thinks I'm your financial enemy, I said quietly. He shook his head. You've been my biggest supporter since day one. Don't let her rewrite history. The next day, he called his mother and told her that we make decisions together, period. He reminded her that I supported him through school and lean years. He also made it clear that threatening divorce over a financial disagreement was unacceptable. From what I heard, she tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. As for sister-in-law, we did end up talking with our accountant and lawyer. They outlined all the risks, tax implications, liability issues, potential family conflict if payments were late or circumstances changed. When we presented those realities to mother-in-law, she didn't like the answer. She wanted an immediate yes, no strings attached. We declined. Not because we don't care about family, not because we're greedy, but because we worked too hard to jeopardize our stability. We're still helping sister-in-law in smaller ways, like assisting with budgeting and exploring mortgage options she can qualify for on her own. What we're not doing is handing over hundreds of thousands of dollars on a handshake. Mother-in-law hasn't fully forgiven me. She still makes comments about how some people change when money comes in. I don't respond anymore. I don't need to. What I find ironic is this. When we were scraping by, no one questioned whether I had a say in the bills I was helping to pay. No one called me a gold digger when I was stretching grocery money or juggling side jobs. But the moment there's real money involved, suddenly I'm an outsider. Funny how that works. We're moving forward with our house build. We're investing wisely. We're protecting our kids' future. And if that makes me the villain in someone else's narrative, I'll sleep just fine in my soon-to-be-paid-for bedroom. Let's talk about who really won. Story one was the silence of absence. The family planned a cruise around free childcare, never asked and assumed compliance. When the OP simply wasn't there, the whole plan collapsed. Deposits lost, trips canceled, and the best part? She was 2 states away, hiking and laughing while they panicked. She didn't argue, she just left. Story 2 was cold, literal justice. The brother stole boots, wore them to dinner, and got caught. But instead of a lecture, he got a minus 20 degrees Celsius walk to his car in pink slippers. The image is so perfect, it almost feels staged. He never stole from OP again. Some lessons don't need words. But story 3 wins, not because of the money, though the bonus was substantial, but because of the history. The OP supported her husband through school, through lean years, through doubt and exhaustion. She never complained. And when success finally came, the mother-in-law tried to erase her contribution entirely. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.